Hey divers, Alec, Peirce, Scuba, Tech Tips. So what the heck have I got this 60-year-old regulator in my hand? We're talking about tech tips. Well, there's a simple reason. A lot of you divers out there have old regulators. Now, in many cases, when you call me and you send comments, say you have an old regulator, it could be a Decor, which is my opinion is not old, that's mid-90s. But some of you do have some old regulators, even going back sometimes to the old two-hose regulators like this one from 1955. 1955, my goodness gracious, you realize that's over 60 years. But anyway, this regulator is special. It doesn't matter for this particular video, but this is a regulator that was used in Sea Hunt. Yep, this is exactly the type of regulator that Mike Nelson used in his Sea Hunt series. Now, how does this become a tech tip? Well, you've been asking, can you fix up old regulators? Well, obviously the answer is clear. This regulator is the same, if not better, than new. How can it be better than new? Well, it's been completely restored, and the materials that are used in the restoration are better than the materials that were available 60 years ago. So these hoses are silicone hoses. They'll last forever. The mouthpiece as well. The valves inside are all silicone, so they'll last forever. The old rubber ones had to be replaced every couple of 3 years. So how does this relate to you? You got an old regulator kicking around? Well, the first thing is, yes, in many cases, your old regulator can be serviced. If it's an old Decor or an old Mares or an old Poseidon, in many cases, they can be restored. Some cases, not. This is a very old regulator, 60 years old, and it's a very popular regulator, was popular at the time, and parts for this are easily available. Likewise, this old regulator as well. Another model, in fact, that Lloyd Bridges, playing in his role of Mike Nelson of Sea Hunt, also used later. This is a later model. This regulator came out in about 1960-61. He started using it in 61-62, just as the series was coming to a close. It's a later model of the same thing, an old Voigt two-hose. And again, these hoses are all new material, new chrome clamps and everything else on this is new. And these are fully functional. The insides are very simple, and if you have the proper replacement parts, which are available for a number of different companies on the internet, then you can rebuild this yourself or have it rebuilt for you. I'll just stop for a minute. If you have an old regulator like this, an old two-hose, then in my opinion, is that the best place to get information. And if you need to get service and or order parts, simply go to Vintage Double Hose. That's easy. It's a double hose regulator, and it's vintage. So go to Vintage Double Hose. All kinds of information on there about double hose regulators. Which ones can be repaired, which ones cannot be repaired, and parts and so on is available. Now, if you have a newer single hose regulator, this one is not new, by the way. This particular regulator came out in 61, so it's very old as well. But even if you have a newer a single hose regulator, then you can very often get service parts and service for it. Some places you can, some regulators you can, not all of them. This old model, again, was used on Sea Hunt, since that's my passion, so I'm using these examples from my collection, my Sea Hunt collection. This particular regulator, no, cannot be restored. This regulator, the first stage is fine, but the second stage had a very unique and rather sophisticated, which means complicated, diaphragm. And they were very, very thin rubber, and they've all corroded over 60 years. I have never seen a diaphragm for this particular model, the Explorer, or better known as the aqua-matic. Never seen a diaphragm in good condition. And they're so complicated with a built-in exhaust and a built-in metal cone and so on that they're impossible to make, almost impossible to make, so you can't get restorations. They take this regulator, a different example. It's the same time frame. This is also from the very early 60s. This is a water lung, very, very old regulator. Yes, you can get parts for most of these because this is a much more standard diaphragm style. So it has a few O-rings, diaphragm, a low pressure seat in the first stage as well. So for this regulator, yes, you can get parts and rebuild this completely. So if you have a newer regulator, no matter what it is, a Techno or a Mares, Poseidon, Decor, and so on, that's only 10, 15, 20 years old, not exactly vintage, but old, yes, you can very often get parts and service for it. Now, divers call or comment and they say, I took my old regulator into the dive store and the guy wouldn't fix it. Well, that's his choice. That's his prerogative. And a lot of dive stores are like that. They really don't want to service old regulators. Now, don't think that they're trying to rip you up for money. They're not. There is a little bit of liability involved if they do repair a very old regulator, even if it's done properly. and you go for your scuba dive and there's a problem, they might be blamed because they fixed that old regulator, which is very old. It's the same situation if you have an old motorcycle, an old car. I have some 71 Norton Commandos. And a lot of people don't want to service them because the old cable-operated brakes and that kind of stuff and so on. So I have to do it all myself. Same situation with regulators. Some dive store service people don't want to get involved with the older equipment, but some don't mind. Some do. And if you can't find anybody, first of all, get a hold of me and also go onto the internet. You'll often find there's lots of information, often service parts and service information for these regulators. I do have, and there are available, service manuals for almost every regulator that was ever made. And there are often parts that are available. Sometimes original, new, old stock parts, kits, but very often they are new parts that will still work properly in that regulator. So, bottom line, it's a very short tech tip. I wanted to show you a couple of these old regulators from Sea Hunt. We're here in Silver Springs, Florida, doing our Sea Hunt demonstration. As you can see, the glass bottom boats behind me, and there are scuba divers down there right now wearing this 60-year-old equipment, putting on Sea Hunt scenarios, fighting anacondas and shooting spear guns for the entertainment of the visitor. It's a whole lot of fun. But for you folks, from our tech tip, the important thing is, yes, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, you can, in fact, restore completely to new condition, operation and condition, your old regulator. So don't throw it out. If you really have your heart set on using it, either get out there and look for it or give me a comment. Okay, I hope that settled a couple of issues there, and I hope you enjoyed the pictures here in Silver Springs and the old regulators. I'll talk to you soon. Alec, Peirce, Scuba, Tech Tips.